Welcome one and all to a surprise, spicy extravaganza of DreadBall action. And the main surprise here is that it's taken me about a month to put this video up, instead of immediately after the event, but I have been quite busy and prioritising lots of Kings of War stuff, and these DreadBall tournament reports tend to only get about 97 views anyway. So we'll see how this one does. And just to make it a little bit more entertaining and to entice some eyeballs here, I'm going to pop up into the corner of the screen. Hello there. Now, as you can see, this is the Co-Prosperity Cup, which took place at Mantic HQ a few weeks ago. And if we dive onto image 1 here, then you will see that game 1 I'm against the Zor, and I was playing the Ada-Lorana, if that's how you want to pronounce it. And this is the first tournament where I haven't taken the Z's DreadBall. The previous 2 events, I won all my games between those 2 events, winning one tournament, finishing second in another, despite winning all my games in that one. So going for a different team this time, because my strategy with the Z's isn't really conducive to an entertaining game, especially if I'm the home team and I'm able to rush all my players straight onto the pitch, just block up all the scoring areas, and then use the coaching dice generated by having all those excess players to then occasionally score a point with the monkey who's available who isn't causing a blockage. So it's quite difficult to play against that strategy, especially if you are the away team. So let's go for a different team this time, and I went for the Phase Dudes, the Phase Bros, whatever you want to call them. And game 1 is actually live streamed. It was on the Mantic channel, and I've put a link to it in the description if anyone wants to watch game 1 live streamed before they go on with this. Then feel free to jump over there, click that link in the description now, dive over there and then come back. So I will be spoiling the result of that game very shortly, so you should probably pause it and move away now, because I'm going to be giving away the result in 3, 2, 1. Okay, now it's time to start talking about game 1. Now, I didn't have many pictures because it was being live streamed anyway, and as you can see, one little mistake that my opponent has made here, because of the positioning of that green thing in the background there, it's like a token that you put on top of the strike or the scoring hex that you're aiming to shoot into, except it was positioned incorrectly on this table. It was actually put 1 hex forward. My opponent made the mistake of thinking that was safe with the number 7 player a spot further forward than it actually is in that picture, which enabled me later on in the game to then point out, wait a minute, that's in the wrong place. I can actually sneak behind there and shoot. So that was quite an amusing incident. Overall, though, it was very unlucky game for all concerned, I think. Every time we tried to achieve anything, we failed. Very little was done. I think there were only 2 successful strikes during the whole game. My opponent got a 2-pointer. I think I got a 1-pointer. Something along those lines, and that was about it. Every time we tried to kill anything, we failed, and it was just really bad rolling, as you'll see if you've seen it on the stream. And with the final throw of the dice, in the final rush, I did have the opportunity to win the game with a 2-pointer. However, wow, it did not succeed. I had 2 dice and a reroll, I think, and I only needed to get 1 4+ on any of those 3 attempts, but failed on all of them, so I ended up losing that game. And you can see we actually ran out of time as well before the end, so we couldn't complete all the rushes, but the way we were rolling, we weren't going to achieve much regardless. And there's the final score. You can see just 1 extra point to my opponent there. So on the live stream, that was a defeat. Going on to the second game then, and this is against, I believe these are the Crystallans. So their ability is the fact that when I think it's when they're bunched together, they get extra dice to beat you up with. So they're very good at killing you. And I don't think this video is going to take too long, by the way. There's not a huge amount of pictures that were taken. But hopefully we'll get at least 1 person commenting in the chat by the end of it. I am keeping an eye on it, out the corner of my eye there. So, these Crystal Felons of Doom up against, and you can see the shapely butt cheeks of the Ada-Lorana that I have painted. I don't think you'll get any pictures of them from the front unless I've marched them down the other end of the board and then turned them round at some point. And you can see my general strategy. I'll give you a quick overview of that. I think this is in the opponent's half here. And you can see one of my players gets stuck down the end there. And I think the ball spends a lot of time in this corner during this game. I keep trying to pick it up down there, failing. My opponent tries to pick it up, fails, so we just jump back and forth between us, failing a lot. And a lot of time spent with the ball right there next to the referee. And yep, it just continues like that for most of the game, so it's another really bizarre one. I'm trying to get a picture of my half. There we go. So, my strategy. I will put my guard in the bonus strike hex in the furthest away strike area from my opponent. And I think that's a kind of a good staging post for the guard, because enemies that then come into my half, guard's in a position to zip out, bash somebody, and then the Ada-Lorana, they have the interesting ability where their players can become insubstantial. And if you do a slam while insubstantial, you have to move into a hex that has an enemy in it, and then it counts as a slam from the rear, and they can only dodge it then. So it's very, very handy, and I was able to pull that off quite a lot. But you then teleport into the subs bench afterwards. So you really want to be doing it as your first action with that player. So then with the second action, you can then move them back onto the pitch into a defensive position. Otherwise, you're a player down in your opponent's turn. So I like to put... Oh, you've got a comment here. Steve, yes, it was my opponent in game number 1. I had 1 dice with a reroll, and he played the card that stopped me using my coaching dice. Yes, in the final rush, I had some coaching dice available, but I wasn't able to use them because of a card that came up. So that was unfortunate. And as I was saying here with my strategy, so if I have the guard pretty much in the middle of the pitch, and that gives him the opportunity to then, especially if I move another player to touch an opponent, if I can attack, for example, an enemy guard, it'll be classed as a rear attack. So often they'll be down to 0 dice with an attack in the rear if I can get players around them as well. And that's very, very handy indeed. So when he's done the slam, the guard then teleports to the subs bench, runs back on into the middle again, defending an area, preventing the opponent from scoring from there, and then also the ability to, in my next turn, do the same thing again. So first action, hit somebody, second action, run back onto the pitch from the subs bench. And one thing I don't like about this team, which is really just because I've played Z's so much, I don't get opportunity to buy a lot of cards this team. The Z's, because they can move 2 for the price of 1 usually, with just a little, especially the tactics I play, where you just want to be nudging players around, they don't have to move all that much, because a lot of them are just there to defend an area. So you often have the opportunity to buy 2 cards in a turn with the Z's, which are then going to give you some re-rolls later on, and some of the effects on the cards are useful as well, and extra actions, and so on. Whereas with these guys, I was actually having to use most of my actions and wasn't able to buy many cards, because I'd get one, usually a jack or a striker in position behind an opponent, then slam them with the guard. The guard runs back on, that's 3 actions gone already, and then 2 other actions to try and score a point. So not very efficient compared to the Z's. You can see you can team up on people and get them stuck on the ground. Is always a nice strategy in DreadBall. And when I don't have enough players to guard the whole area, really the main areas you want to be guarding are at the back for the 3 and 4 pointers. But you can see, because of the huge amount of dice that these crystal fiends are rolling when they attack, I've actually had 2 of my strikers killed during this game. And it looks like I've got someone in position to shoot there. One thing that I don't do in DreadBall that I should, and I'm sure the more experienced players that play this game all the time probably do it, when you're about to shoot, what you can do is not be facing directly forwards. You can actually turn slightly to the side. You can still see what you're shooting at, so you can still do it, but it also leaves you open potentially to have the ball thrown to you later on from certain angles. Whereas if you're facing straight ahead, you're going to have to waste an action to turn round to then receive the ball. So just a little tip there to save some actions. And not a lot is accomplished during this game either. As you can see, the score tracker is still dead in the center. And my opponent, right at the end of the game, has the opportunity to try and win it. And I believe it was a failure, because you can see the ball just lands right there. And that means that that game ended up in a draw, if I remember correctly. I think I do. I have a pretty good memory for these things. So, nothing at all much accomplished there. Very, very difficult. 2 strikers dead, and lots of failure going on. The ball mainly stuck in the top right of the screen there. I think in the final round of the game, my opponent had to try and pull off some ridiculous maneuver that involved lots of dashing to try and get into a position to nearly score with the final throw of the game, to dodge past some of my players. And because the crystals are pretty slow, there was lots of really unlikely dashes involved, all of which succeeded. And then the easy part was taking the shot, which was then a failure. I think that is correct. I'm confusing it with one of the other games, and I'll let you know later because it has been several weeks. But I think that's right. And here you can see, into game 3, I'm against the Orcs, the Marauders, whatever they like to be known as. And these look very nice, actually, like the paint jobs on there. From a distance, maybe they don't grab you so much because it's a lot of grey, but when you get up close, you can see that they are actually quite tasty, these ones. And the Marauders do quite well at the moment in this edition, from what I've seen. And it looks like we're using my Ada-Lorana ball there, because it looks a little bit transparent. So they've got a decent look at how I start off the games with my setup, with the guard right in the centre there to do that strategy. And especially for being the away team, I know the opponent's going to move into my half as well. Whereas if I'm home, maybe I'd want the guard further forward so I can actually hit the enemy in the first turn without having to do multiple dashes. Although the Ada-Lorana are really good at dashing, it seems. So let's have a look what kind of onslaught we're going to get here. Now, I'm able to knock players down with stunning regularity, but not cause too many injuries in this event so far. Players have been knocked down a lot, but not killed. And you can see what's going on there. There's a huge, brutal Orc guard with a little bit of assistance there on the enemy half next to each other, which can only mean one thing, that players are being injured left and right. So 1 out for a turn, 1 out for 3 at the moment. And look at this ridiculous situation here. So there's 2 of these Orcs down. I want to kill them. I don't want to knock them down. They're no good to me knocked down. I need them out of the game, really, because it means I have to stand there watching them to make it unlikely they'll get up. So that's tying up multiple players. And if I move away, they'll just stand up and start killing me again. So I want them dead, not down. And the kind of situation that you end up with sometimes when one player doesn't feel they can score and they have possession of the ball, maybe it's quite far back in their half when they pick it up, so they'll get into a position and then aim to surround their own player slightly. You have to leave a bit of a gap, otherwise I think it's an illegal move. But you can see that one of those goblins there has the ball, and I've gone in there to try and steal it by the looks of it, but I'm totally surrounded by the enemy players there. And I think that's probably that player there that just got horribly killed by being surrounded. But I do manage to get a bit of an injury on one of the Orcs at some point. It looks like he's off for 2 turns there. And it's actually going pretty well at the moment because I've got those Orcs down. I'm able to get my strikers into the enemy half, as you can see, into decent positions to score. And I've been blocking up the back scoring area there to prevent the big points being scored. So my opponent, when shooting, has been typically, I've been forcing them to go for the lower scoring areas, whereas it's obvious I've been able to take a shot there from a very juicy area, which is just there. You can see there. And I actually end up racking up a lot of points and winning quite handily, despite having at least one player horrifically murdered and several others injured. That one actually went quite well. So the fact that I was able to keep some of the orcs on the floor for a long time was a big deal, because it means they weren't killing. And then, thankfully, the goblins weren't very successful with their attempts to score, and my players were. Because the goblins aren't too much of a threat to kill me. So there's a nice juicy one, and the slightly more in-depth pictures of these latter games as well, as I was getting into the swing of things. Because when it's a game you've not played for a while, you don't really want to be taking just endless pictures, especially with quite an engaging game where even when your opponent's doing something, often you have to be ready to roll dice as well. So this final game looks like I'm up against the Brockers in the final round, and that's dwarfy goodness. So see that there's a casualty there. I think that's the first, it might be the first thing I've actually killed in this tournament. And okay, so look at this. I have got up to 6 points right now. So you would think that's very, very healthy because I get 2 big scores right at the start. You can see right at the top of the screen there, right in the middle, you can just see the feet and the base of one of my players who has gone into enemy territory to score. I think I scored 2 3-pointers very early in the game because we're only on the 4th rush here. If you look to the right hand side near my head, you can see the counters show where we're up to. So very early in the game I take a 6-point lead, which is going great as far as I'm concerned. And I've killed a player, so it's still looking pretty healthy as we move on. But what starts to happen is I get the opportunity to try and win the game at some point. I only need a 1-pointer to do it. Let's see, is there a picture of it? I think possibly my player on the left of the screen there in the enemy half, you can just see him there, the top left quadrant of the screen. I think I had the opportunity to get in position to try and score around there, but wasn't able to do so. I definitely had a shot to try and win the game when I was 6 points ahead, but could not pull it off due to some unfortunate dice rolling there. And you can see the score on the left-hand side that my opponent has started to claw it back a bit, because now I'm only 3 ahead after some points are scored. And you may also notice that some of my players have vanished. So hopefully we'll get it. You can see that there's at least 1 dead or down over on the right there. And you can see the kind of downed player marker, which is just a floating ball for the Ada-Lorana at the bottom of the screen. And I think that's the player over to the left that's representing. And the player over on the right, directly under me, let's just move me out the way a second. So you can see the player who, the top corner of me is poking there. That player is dead, I think. That's actually a good way to do a kind of cursor on this, isn't it? You could just make a little picture of an arrow and move it around. That would be quite handy, I think, for Kings of War, perhaps, when I want to point at a certain unit. Okay, so, I think that player there also had the opportunity to score. Let's see. Look at the player directly under me right now. The opportunity to score, but again failed. So the dice just totally abandoned me in the latter half of this game, and my players are being killed off and injured. Look how many there are in the injured part of the bench. You can see 3 there at least. And I've only got 1 player active on the pitch, and 1's down. So, and there's 1 dead, definitely. It's not looking healthy, and my opponent actually manages to take the lead later on because I just have no players left. They're all injured or dead. And I really had to win the game early on, but couldn't successfully roll any dice once I got to 6 points ahead. And closing in on the end of the game, and that is in fact the end. We didn't have time for the final rush because the round was coming to an end. And, I mean, what could I have done though? Let's see, did my opponent even score? I think the ball was going to come back on. You see where it is there. But we didn't have any time left after that. So that means I lost. And had it come back on, I was only 1 point behind, I believe, at this stage. So I think I definitely could have scored if we'd got another turn in, but then of course my opponent would have been fairly unopposed to do pretty much the same thing because all my players are injured, so I couldn't have prevented my opponent scoring in rush 14. So I don't think it would have made a huge difference. So there's another loss to end on. Despite being 6 points ahead, that just shows you never give up in DreadBall, because all it takes is a little bit of misfortune on the side of your opponent, and you have to be ready to strike in there, start to claw the game back and commit serious acts of murder. So after those games, this is what I went home with. Now, first of all, the Matsudan team there in the bottom right of the picture, that everyone who attended the event got a team just for entering, so that's the team I chose there. The rest of these things, actually, 2 of them were Mantic points. I've got a giant sheet of Mantic points. In fact, look at there, and I've crossed out all the ones that I used as well. It was easier than peeling them off because I've stuck way more on here than are actually supposed to be on one of these sheets. So I got a couple of dead zone things. I got the new monkey leader, and he's right in the middle with a bit of plastic bag over his face, and the plastic Nikolovsky model as well. So I picked up those for Mantic points. The other things, I believe that little token set there in the middle was also free with entry to the tournament. I think that's right. And everything else I just picked up from bargain bins. So a little DreadBall dice bag, some actual official DreadBall dice to hopefully replace my dice that have been awful while attempting to play DreadBall with them. I got some bases as well. I think they were definitely reduced from the price that's on the pack there because they were just in a bargain bin. I've got a couple of teams that don't have any bases with them, and I've got some other models as well that could do with a base, and things like score trackers. If you mount them on a base, it's easy as well. It stops them sliding away. And that little bag in the middle is a bargain bag of Hellboy stuff, and the only reason I wanted that is because there's a tentacle monster in there that I thought I could use for some dead zone terrain at some point. Some kind of hideous monstrosity, some mutant beastie that's been genetically created in a lab and is now bursting through a wall, perhaps. Maybe I'll do something with that eventually. And that is all the images from the Co-Prosperity Cup. So let's find a nice image to rest on while we do a bit of a wrap up here. Let's look at this one, and I will disappear from the picture. So it was a lot of fun. DreadBall generally is. It was interesting trying out a different team for a change instead of just the Z's. And I'm going to try a different team again at the next one, which is in 1 week's time, which is the DreadBall tournament at WOFCON. And if you're available and haven't signed up for that yet, then you certainly should. WOFCON featuring Dead Zone and DreadBall on the Saturday, and then Kings of War Vanguard on the Sunday, all of which I will be playing in. And I actually won the WOFCON DreadBall tournament last year, but I won't be using the Z's again this time, so I wouldn't bet on myself winning again. It seems unlikely that that will happen. But I'm undecided on which team to take yet. I could do with a practice game or two, but I'm not sure whether that's going to come to fruition or not. I'm leaning towards possibly taking the Orcs, actually. I haven't played with them in this edition yet, but they seem to do well. And they're a nice, pretty simple one, and they're a team I've had painted for a long time, but never used them in a competitive setting. I don't even think I've used them much since maybe 5 years ago, actually, when I was playing the game a fair bit. So I'll look forward to giving them a try possibly. I've also got teams painted in the form of humans, Forge Fathers, and the Veermin Rat Dudes as well. So we'll see if I decide to take any of those instead. But the Ada-Lorana, they're fun. You get the opportunity to do some nice shenanigans with the phasing in and out. Phasing through players to get on the other side of them or just to slam them. And in general, they're pretty good, except you don't have a lot of spare players. So when you get a couple of injuries, you can't then bring players on because you don't have any substitutes. You only have the 6 standard players, I think. So if you start getting injuries, you are suffering greatly. Whereas I'm used to the Z's, where if you get a couple of injuries, whoop-de-doo. The worst thing that happens is maybe you'll get 1 or 2 less coaching dice in a turn. You can still just completely block up all the important areas of the board with just the massed amount of monkeys that you have available to you. So that takes some getting used to. Perhaps a team somewhere in the middle would be a good place to go next. So the orcs or the humans, for example, where you get a decent number of players, so you actually have a couple of substitutes as well. You don't have to have all your players out there immediately, and you don't just have 10,000 to call on when the time comes. So, time to wrap this one up, I think. If anyone is currently watching this live, I know I did tell everyone to pause it and go and watch the live stream instead and then come back to this later, so I'm not expecting too many people to be tuned in live at this point. But if anyone is, then you might want to drop any comments or criticism or questions in there ASAP before this one goes off the air. I'll tell you what I'm up to as well. Video-wise, there's obviously going to be reports from those 3 tournaments that are coming up next weekend, which are DreadBall, Dead Zone, and Kings of War Vanguard. See some nice in-depth, juicy, spicy, sizzling coverage of all of those. And I'm not sure what I'm going to be taking for the Vanguard event. It depends how my painting goes this week, because I'm working on something top secret. See if that's ready in time. Of course, if I manage to get a practice game in, it'll be public knowledge to at least one person. So I suppose that could be classed as private knowledge rather than public. I'm painting a lot at the moment because I, perhaps foolishly, decided to take on the challenge of getting my Abyssal Dwarf army painted for Clash of Kings, which is in about 5 weeks' time, I think. So at the moment, I've just been painting a lot of unit bases for them. And then it's onto the models, which I also have a lot of on the table as well. I don't have that many units done yet, but I'm quietly confident that I can have them done in time, because it's not actually taking me that long to do them. I think it's quite an effective, but not vastly time-consuming method that I've come up with for painting them. So you can be trembling in anticipation of that. Pantera says, I missed the stream, going to rewatch it all in a bit. Good luck and see you at WAFCON. Yes, if you're going to be at WAFCON, I doubt that's your real name you're using there, but I definitely will see you there because I'm there for all 3 of the big gaming tournament extravaganzas that are going to be taking place. So, time to wrap this one up, and you can look forward to other juicy content coming very soon. Don't forget to check out the links in the description, including the live stream of the first game from this event that I just covered. There is also links to my Facebook group and other social media nonsense, and if you're a big fan of all this in-depth tactical breakdown coverage of all my games in various different systems, don't forget to send me all your money via Patreon or PayPal, or you could send me a carrier pigeon with a £10 note tied around its leg if you're that way inclined. And I will catch you all next time, and all that remains to be said is good night out there, whatever